Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cardistrytalk. This is the first episode of Season 3. We're all the way at episode 53 now, so really exciting. Today I have a guest that I've had requested, probably top 3 or top 4 most requested guests. I'm super happy to have him here. We have Linus Schmidt. You may know him from Komorebi, Eraserhands, or just a lot of really awesome cardistry moves. I'm super happy to have him here. Linus, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it should be a really fun one. I know like I said, you've been a really highly requested one, especially from a couple people that have been pestering me about it. So super happy to finally get this going. My first question for you, and what I'm kind of interested in, is just kind of your background in cardistry, how you got into it, and kind of how long you've been doing it.
For me, the line between doing magic and doing cardistry is like very blurry. Like I really don't remember an exact date of when I switched over, but the first time I ever picked up a deck of cards was on Thanksgiving Day, maybe 6 or 7 years ago at this point. I think I was in 7th grade at the time, but just like started off learning color changes and stuff like that, and then eventually got really into like Singaporean cardistry. I think some of the first videos I was ever watching was like Kuma Films and Vert's videos, and then like School of Cardistry and all that stuff. That was really what got me into it and got me interested. And then from there, like Tobias Lebanon, Dealer Script, Fontaine, all that stuff came secondary to that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know how many people. It would be interesting to see how many people come from like Singapore or Fontaine, like what the first introductions were for everybody. Yeah. Obviously, you've been doing cardistry for a while. A lot of people really respect your style. When it comes to like making moves in the creative process, do you have any tips or any kind of strategies that you've come up with that you think work out pretty well?
Yeah, and I think that the answer to that question is always changing. For me right now, the most important thing is to actually sit down and like work on a move. And I have so many random openers and little bits and pieces, and like for the longest time I would just sort of do them over and over and over again and expect something to just sort of happen naturally. But I've had the most success creating recently from actually like sitting down in front of a camera and like consciously working towards something. Not to say that accidents and moves occurring naturally is a bad thing. I think that's how a lot of moves and ideas get started, is like something happens or you explore a certain grip and then, one thing leads to the next. But to actually work through and finish a whole move, I think it takes a lot more work than I previously thought it would, and like a lot of my older moves were sort of just born from accidents and doing the same thing over and over until something happens. But lately I'm really trying to like work to get moves.
Yeah, it's really hard to like conceptualize a move. I think a lot of people, moves kind of happen from mistakes, like you were saying. Like you'll be trying to do an already established move and then you do something on accident, it still kind of works out. Or like I think everybody also has that thing where they're just mindlessly shuffling and they do something cool and they don't realize what they did or what they did, which is always frustrating. But like you said, sitting down to make a move can be really difficult, and just finding the time to do that as well.
I was going to say, like, not rushing yourself to finish anything is always a good thing to do. Like, even if you're working towards a big solo video, it doesn't have to be finished at any specific time. Just go at your own pace. Helps.
When do you feel like like a move is finished for you?
It's a gut feeling, really. Because there have been times where I've like sent friends unfinished moves, or like maybe not unfinished, but I'll ask them if they think it's done, and they could say yes, that's done. But if I don't feel like it's truly finished, then I won't put it out. I think it was Patrick Barnabas that said like a move is finished when it feels like you've won. That's kind of like a weird way to say it, but I think the idea is definitely there. Like it's just a gut feeling where you feel satisfied with every aspect of it and nothing feels awkward. I think that's a big part of it. It's getting rid of awkward moments in your moves.
Mm-hmm. And that's something I've found with like my moves. A lot of times, at least early on, I'll think something's finished, and then oftentimes for me, I'll find something that kind of removes awkward points, and I'll be like, "Oh, it wasn't finished." I'm always quick to like say a move's finished when usually it's not, which is probably a bad habit. But I think what I've found a lot with talking with so many people over the podcast is like kind of what you said is what a lot of people that we respect in the community have a similar viewpoint where like other people will think a move is finished, but if your gut feeling is there that it's not, then they usually still are trying to explore that and usually end up finding something a little bit better. So I definitely think there's some merit to what you're saying. I know that like Greg Mallon and I think Beckett Beal, some other people have said pretty much the exact same thing. Now that we kind of talked about the creative process with pertaining to cards, I'm kind of interested in like Komorebi and the clothing and everything you've been doing with that brand. How did kind of Komorebi came to be?
Before Komorebi, I had this small brand called Something Else, which wasn't much of anything. It was just kind of like sporadically releasing mediocre graphic t-shirts. And it's not something I'm that proud of, but it definitely like laid the foundation for like Komorebi later down the line. You know, it's like doing anything for the first time is a good way to figure out what not to do the second time. And I think I got a lot of mistakes finished the first time around. But with Something Else, there wasn't really ever a deck associated with it. It was just kind of like t-shirts. But I was working on deck designs at the time. These were made like years before Komorebi was ever officially a name. And I had a few designs that are in our like collection that were made a long time before the brand was ever formulated. And I think at a certain point, Komorebi started just as a necessity because I wanted to shut down the first brand because it wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't really enjoying it, running it that much. But I still had these designs and these decks that I wanted to release. So Komorebi was just the next step because I needed a new outlet to put these designs out into the world. And that's how it started.
Yeah, I know I've talked with Parker before. He kind of explained some of the background of Komorebi too. I think it was 12 decks, right? Or is that the right amount?
Yeah, that was the starting maximum.
Just 12 decks that you kind of made out of fun because you want to be creative and want to have something cool. But I think with Komorebi too, I think you've had a lot more interaction with other people in the community, like the Cardistry community, like Parker and Jorge. So definitely, I think that's probably helping out with the brand and everything. What's kind of your vision for Komorebi? Because I know you're based in Cardistry, obviously, but you're also showing off clothing and hoodies and coats and all types of stuff like that right now. You got the hoodie contest going on. So what's kind of the future vision for what Komorebi is?
It's always changing. I mean, we don't have a set end goal, but our goal for this year is to definitely push high fashion a lot more. And something that we've said in our like team meetings since the beginning is we really want to, obviously be in the Cardistry community and be active and stimulate conversation in the Cardistry community. But we also want to push the idea that a deck of cards is like a fashion accessory. And it's a home good, it's a fashion accessory, it's a high-end item, because a lot of cardists wouldn't see it this way, but I think it's a high fashion item. It's like, Fontaine, Anyone, all these other brands, they're sort of presenting themselves as larger than just a deck of cards. And Komorebi wants to do the same thing, but sort of take it in a different direction. And right now we're mostly limited by finances, and we don't have the money to do a lot of these like larger, more elaborate like fashion things that we would like to do. For instance, we were trying to get together and work on some like custom knit sweaters, but the factory that we were trying to work with dropped our project because we weren't ordering enough. We could only print like maybe 20, and that wasn't enough for them, so they dropped us, which is unfortunate. But we're hoping that this year, by the end of it, we can start doing larger projects that are more fashion based and still combining it with the playing cards, but sort of trying to find a balance where the two meet.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of cardistry brands are kind of heading. Is kind of almost like a lifestyle, more so than just releasing playing cards. Like, there's definitely like playing card specific companies out there, but I think most of the cardistry brands are kind of heading in an almost fashion based type of realm. And it's interesting to see too, with the financial aspect of it, because I know that's something that like a lot of you can really struggle with in the cardistry community, because there's not a huge return on investment for playing cards, depending on how much you sell them for. But when it comes to like clothing and stuff, that's when you can get more financially more back to where you can create bigger and better projects.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a necessity to sell stuff outside of playing cards, I think.
Also just reaching new markets, and trying to get playing cards into the hands of people that wouldn't normally consider it on a daily basis. And I think, as you said, it's a lot harder to sell playing cards than it appears. And I think a lot of brands like to put up a front of, we're successful, we're selling out cards, but it's very difficult to do, especially with how many more, brands there are right now. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think there's even room for more brands to start coming out. And I think a good example is Yangan Yao Hei, which is the Hong Kong-based brand. I think they came out, and although some people would argue that we don't need another brand, I think they're doing so much for us visually that it's completely worth it. And the more people that come in and add to it, the better.
And it'll be interesting to see too, like as cardistry kind of grows, because right now I think the issue isn't necessarily that there's a lot of brands. I think there's just a lot of brands for the size of cardistry.
True.
And I think a lot of that comes from because we're all creative is a part of it, so we all like long to do more and to do things creatively. But I think as cardistry expands, there's going to be a lot more room for just growth in that aspect. I think there's a lot more room for casual cardistry fans, if that makes any sense. I think most of the cardists in the community are like super into cardistry, like obsessed almost.
We all want to be
but
the
I
best.
think there's a lot of room for like casual cardistry that I don't think we've really grown into too much. That might be happening sometime soon as it becomes more accessible to the public, and as you have people like you and other brands kind of bringing and shedding light on other communities like fashion, what cardistry is and what you can do with the deck of playing cards.
For sure.
And it's kind of interesting too, you saying like decks of cards are almost seen like fashion. I think a lot of people like to like match their deck of cards with their outfit and stuff like that. So I think there's definitely going to be a lot of style and kind of customization with playing cards. So it's almost like a deck for skating, where you have something that really matches your personality or something that you really connect with, and you have different decks for different days and stuff like that. I think that's definitely something that's starting to happen more.
Sure. And a lot of people do it subconsciously too. Just like you might go through the day and at 5 o'clock you're like, oh my God, I'm matching my deck to my pants.
I know Sean O says he always like kind of gravitates towards black decks because he always wears pretty much all black most of the time. So it's interesting how people's personalities kind of come out with the deck of cards. It's interesting too because like I think purple, the color purple playing cards are like my favorite designs, but I never wear purple ever. But maybe I should look into that. So maybe that's telling me something.
Yeah.
But one question I do have that I want to make sure I don't forget about that's from the community was if you have any tips on how to get recognized in the community, because I know that was something that I had, I think, 2 people ask when I posted to my story what they would like to hear about. So do you have any thoughts about how you can be better recognized in the community of cardistry?
Yeah. It's weird. I think that recognition just comes from consistency. And the first few years that I was like really full into cardistry, like Magic was behind and I was just into cardistry. I tried posting every single day. I don't know if that was specifically like a card related thing or if it was just sort of like an Instagrammer thing where it was like, oh, I'm going to post every single day for a year. But I wanted to do that for cardistry, whether it's posting a nice picture of a deck of cards or posting a new move or like a combo. But I never made it through a full year. I think the farthest I got was like 200 and something days in. But I think the reason I have so much recognition is just from that. Like, there are so many artists that are so much better than me. And personally, I still think I have a long way to go before I'm satisfied with my own abilities. But I think a lot of it is that. And posting every day also forces you to be better. It forces you to, you know, just create a little something every day. Even if it's simple, you know, it'll make you take a photograph that day, or it'll make you try and do a really nice combo. And even if you don't realize it, you're just improving at like small little fractions every single day. And I think that's what I would attribute my own recognition to, I guess. So consistency and just trying to do something every single day.
Yeah. I mean, there's kind of the obvious aspect of that of just you're posting more so more people are going to see it. But there's also, like you were saying, there's this constant improvement. And I think what's really good about being really consistent with what you're doing is you can look back. You kind of almost have like a lookbook, I don't know, but you can like look in the back to what you've done in the past and see like how you've improved over time, which is always a really satisfying thing. I know that I've experienced that with the podcast as well. It's just looking back at like the first episode and being like, oh, I used to consider this good, but I don't anymore. Yeah. I'm sure you probably feels that way about some of your moves, maybe. But that's something that's also good about being really consistent. When it just comes to like algorithm stuff too, like Instagram usually tends to prefer people, just most algorithms, I think, tends to prefer consistent content because they want people on their platform. So just from like a algorithm kind of aspect, that's another thing. I also think this whole question in general can sometimes maybe not be the healthiest, because I don't know that recognition is the end goal for cardistry. Should be the end goal for cardistry.
Yeah. Just personal satisfaction with what you're doing is like, I think that's where we need to be, just enjoying what you're doing. And as you say, it's not a healthy thing to just want to be the most recognized cardist. And I hope that we can move past that to some extent. And I think I really like what you're saying too about more casual cardistry and just having people just enjoy it rather than trying to be the best all the time. You know?
Yeah. I think there's a very almost competitive aspect of cardistry where we're always trying to make like something bigger, something better, which is good because we're making an astounding amount of moves and an astounding amount of decks and astounding amount of creativity is coming out of cardistry right now. But I almost sometimes wonder if it's not like, if people are going to start experiencing burnout. I think some people already started to have those feelings because there's only going to be so much, especially if your goal is to get recognized or to get like views and stuff. Like in the grand scheme of things, cardistry, even the most viewed cardists aren't viewed as much as like people that make dance videos and stuff like that. Like those are going to get more videos or more views. So like you said, I think it's really important that we're kind of striving for being happy with what you're doing. And at the core, I think just having fun and enjoying it, I think, at least for me, that's what I kind of want to focus on, is kind of just enjoying cardistry and not necessarily worrying about getting views and changing the community or adding something. Which if you get to do that, like, amazing. Like, I think everybody wants to be like Tobias in the community, like, or Noel, where they just have an amazing library of moves that everybody tries to learn. But I don't think it's realistic for most people to be able to reach that height. New segment that I want to do on the show that I haven't done in the past is always go over music recommendations. I don't know if I sent this in the topics list that I sent to you, but
Yes.
This is something I want to start adding. It says I want to make like a compilation of music recommendations at the end of the year, where it's like 52 different artists, 52 music recommendations.
Oh, that would be fun.
That I think would be really cool. So do you have any music recommendations that of either underrated or just people?
I can recommend this one group, Paris, Texas. I've been enjoying their music a lot recently. There's one song. Who's it by? There's this band, Boy Harsher, which a friend of mine put me onto. That's a very good sort of like, it's almost electronic, but with vocals. I guess I would say Boy Harsher is a very good cardistry music.
All right, there you go. If you guys haven't heard of them, I would check them out. I think I'll probably check them out because this is also something I like to do, is just experience other people's tastes in music and fresh new music. When it comes to you, obviously, I think music and photography, creating clothes, cardistry, you have a lot of other hobbies. Have you ever found that like clothes making and photography and that stuff has ever affected your cardistry?
Like move making or performance?
Moves or move making, and then obviously there's like taking pictures of cards and stuff, but when it comes to like move making, have you ever found other hobbies or other inspirations outside of cardistry affect the move itself?
I would say so. Yeah. I think like fashion and photography as a whole sort of influences what you want moves to look like, because if you're focusing just on what's inside of cardistry, you might want a move that's like Phobos Diamos, and it's like, display, very weird looking. But if you focus on like interests outside of cardistry, like fashion photography and that sort of area, then you might want a move that's sort of more like, I don't know, like a sexy move that's like, I don't know. I think it does affect not how you create, but what you want the outcome to be. And sort of, it might influence your flow a little bit. I think it sort of comes in very indirect ways to influence you.
Mm-hmm. I think like a really good example of that is Andrew Avila, how I know he has a strong basis in kind of architecture, and I think that definitely shows through in his moves. For me, I play a lot of soccer, so I always end up integrating my feet on like footstalls and stuff. But I'm just always interested to see how those things affect people's cardistry, because I think it pretty much consistently always does, whether people realize it or not. I think we kind of have our own kind of basis and idea of creativity, or kind of just our go-to type of actions, and they tend to influence what we input affects our output, I think is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
So I think I always love to kind of ask that kind of idea. Do you think there's any other things that you would want to talk about or add to anything that we've talked about already? And you can take your time. I'm going to look over the topics list that I have.
I don't know. I just wish there was like a better way to sort of get more people together in a safe way. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably like something that has been missing is like there hasn't been a Cardistry Con in several years, and also just in-person jams are lower, and there's not as many like jam videos. I think a lot of like the old Fontaine stuff was sort of just like a bunch of dudes hanging out and having a good time, and I think that's what got a lot of people interested in cardistry. Just having fun, hanging out, messing around with cards, you know. More fun than cardistry.
I always say that, like, if you wanted to play, like, a pickup soccer game, like, you could pretty easily find one if you're in a city. But if you ever wanted to find, like, a cardistry group that meets in person, it would pretty much be impossible unless you're in Seattle, or I'm sure probably California. Maybe New York could, maybe you guys could find one in New York. But yeah, it kind of is unfortunate in that aspect that there's not, like, a in-person community as much, because we're just so spread out and so rare. It would be interesting to figure out how could we potentially set that up to where people know where the other cardists are, I guess, or like where they are. I know in the past they did like a cardistry map.
Yeah, I just remembered that. Did the Verts do that?
I don't remember.
I know I can like picture exactly what you're talking about though. It was like you could enter your location and like find people around you on the map. Yeah. I think that would definitely be helpful. Also just like a better way to introduce people to what it is, or a more concrete way of teaching it. Because I think a lot of people, definitely myself, are like stumped when people ask what it is you're doing. And a lot of people answer like, well, it's not magic, it's not gambling, it's kind of like skateboarding, but it's different, you know? And I think we would benefit from having just like a solid, concrete way of saying, this is what it is that we do, and you should do it too, you know? Like,
yeah, I think too, what we could do better at is just kind of like showing other people cardistry, in the sense of like, I don't know, I think most of us are probably introverts. I would think cardists, from my experience, a lot of them have been introverts, but I think we could do a better job of like just walking around in a store and shuffling cards, or, you know, sitting at your local coffee shop and doing it, and like maybe someone comes up to you and be like, what is that? And you can explain it. I think part of the issue isn't necessarily that there's not a great way to describe it. I think it's just so uncommon that people don't have any basis. Because, like, everything at one point is, like, to somebody that has no clue, or that's like a young kid and they see, like, football or soccer or whatever, they have no clue what's going on. They don't know the rules. And you have to kind of learn that stuff.
That's a good point.
But for cardistry, people don't learn those things. So it would be interesting if we could find a way to describe cardistry, almost like rules of cardistry, I guess.
Yeah. And maybe it comes down to what moves you show people for the first time, you know?
Yeah.
I forget who it was. Someone was talking about how they start out with a Charlie A. Or no, they start out with like a cut on a table. And then they're like, okay, happens on a table, how you would play in a game. You can also do it in one hand. But we do it, you know, in two hands and like go on from like, and I'm totally blanking.
I'm pretty sure Kevin Ho. I think it's Kevin Ho had like he put on like a little event and like kind of showed people kind of like that, kind of described the kind of how it expands. One thing I always like to do is I'll show someone a Charlier cut, and then I'll show them the Schmidt fan, and I'll be like, okay, you can now combine those two. And that's kind of like an easy way for people to be like, oh, you combine, and like everything you learn kind of grows off of each other, to where you have almost like complete creativity to an extent, because you have so much control over this object.
And moves like those are also just very easy for people to understand. You know, and if you were to show them like Pandora right off the bat. It would just, you would still see it for what it is, but you wouldn't understand like the nuances of
The
it.
mechanics.
Like, you know, smear fan, it's like you get it, Trillia, you get it, and then when the two go together, you understand everything about all three of those things together.
Mm-hmm. I think part of the issue too is that like everything we're doing right now is like super complex complex, I guess, to where like an outsider doesn't like really understand. Like we're all doing two-hand cuts for the most part, and to laymen, two-hand cuts almost all look exactly the same because they don't have that basis.
Right.
So maybe focusing on showing people the fundamentals would be a good thing. But the problem with that is just that sometimes the fundamentals are kind of boring.
True.
Which is also why it's sometimes hard to get into cardistry, because you spend a lot of time learning how to do this, spend hours learning how to do that, and like it's kind of cool. And I don't know too, because maybe just because I've seen it a million times, but I feel like a layman, if they saw this, they'd just be like, "Oh, neat."
Yeah. Also, you forget how difficult the basics are after you've done it for so long. You know, like if you try and do anything in your opposite hands, like trying to do a two-handed cut in your, it's weird. It's not the, you know what I mean, right? Like if you switch the hand you do cardistry in, it's like everything becomes so difficult all of a sudden.
Yeah, like I've tried. Like one of my dream moves is to have a upside down spring and a regular spring, and then kind of close it together in the middle. But I would have to have like immense control over the left hand spring that I cannot get because I'm just not used to that motion with my left hand. And it's kind of like, okay, that might have been a little bit how it used to be like when I was trying to learn, was struggling so much to get this one thing down. So yeah, that's a pretty good example that I think a lot of people use. But yeah, you often forget how difficult the things we kind of take for granted are, like scissor cut and Charlier and springs and stuff.
I would sort of argue that it's like cumulative, though. Like once you learn a few things, everything gets a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Just the more you learn and the longer you do it, it just gets progressively easier. And it's like, it's a very hard like bump to get over right at the beginning, you know, but once you can do, you know, scissor cut, Charlier, rev cut comfortably, then it's like your opportunities are so much more numerous.
Yeah, it's almost like you kind of develop the tools, and then you can use those tools and combine them. So maybe it'd be good for us to kind of show how once you learn the basics, that get over that initial hump, that does get easier over time. So I think that's one of the hardest things with cardistry that's kind of halting its growth, is that it's just really hard at the beginning. And there's like, it doesn't seem like there's going to be a lot of reward almost, because we're just starting out, and like, it's hard to see people like having like a career in cardistry or like making money off of cardistry, even though that is starting to happen. Like people want to make sure that they're putting their time and efforts into something that's going to be beneficial to them. Mm-hmm. So, or that could potentially be beneficial to them. So I think having like brands pop up and you guys doing really awesome things is super important, showing that people can make a living off of it, but also just showing the incredible stuff that people is creating is worth it, I think would be important. So at the end of the show, I like to do what I call roll out the close-up pad. And that's just my way of saying, is there anything that you would like to promote or any last nugget you would like to leave the audience with? Definitely.
Promotion-wise, the latest 2 Komorebi decks are printing. It seems like they've been printing forever, but hopefully they'll be finished this month or early next month. And I'm very excited to finally put out the Hallmark playing cards this year, which will be coming up next. And that's the blue deck with the big red circle and the white dot in the corner. Apart from that, I'd love to say go support Yanganyo Hey. These just finished printing. Again, amazing brands. Much love to them. That's really it. I'm excited for this year. I hope that we can all take it to a new level.
Yeah, I obviously hope so too. Like always, I'll leave links in the description if you're watching this on YouTube to Linus's stuff and Komorebi stuff. Definitely check it out if you haven't. I think it's definitely worth your time. Linus, thank you for taking your time to be on the show. I hope everybody gained a little bit of knowledge or had a little bit of fun with this interview. And if you haven't seen it, there's also an interview with Parker Mitchell. So definitely check that out. That's pretty also dealing with Komorebi. So Linus, thank you for your time, and see you guys later.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.